Curt Doty with RealmIQ. This is our podcast, RealmIQ Sessions, where we talk about everything AI with international AI leaders. Please give us a follow or subscribe. Today's guest that I'm excited about is Neil Leach, who is involved at the intersection of architectural and AI. His work extends into exploring how AI and digital technologies can impact architectural design and theory. As a co-founder of Digital Futures, which is an initiative that delves into the future of digital design and architecture, Leach has also authored over 40 books on architectural and digital design, positioning him as a leading figure in the exploration of digital technologies and architectural theory and practice. Through his academic roles and research initiatives, Leach investigates the potential of AI to transform architectural design, construction processes, and the conceptualization of space, highlighting his active involvement in the integration of AI within the architectural field. So, Neil, thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to have you. And let's just talk about briefly what led you to embrace AI, because you came out of very traditional design and architectural background, and here we have AI doing a lot of things for us. So I'd love to hear your point of view and philosophy and how you've embraced it.
Thanks, Curt. Well, I'm not sure I come out of a traditional background, but certainly the start of my career, I was working on the Italian Renaissance, on a figure called Leon Battista Alberti, who wrote the first ever book on architecture. And I translated him from Latin into English. But I don't see him as a historical figure. I see him as somebody who was a revolutionary, who was transforming the world of architecture. And I really have continued that the whole time. By a strange coincidence, I should say that Alberti's name begins in A and ends in I. To my mind, architecture is a very dynamic discourse, and you have to keep alert to all the new things that are happening. It's constantly reinventing itself. My particular orientation, as you mentioned, through Digital Futures, has been towards the future. Many of my books have had the word future in the title. And I think predicting the future, spotting the trends, and knowing what the new ideas are, the new technologies, is fundamental if you're going to be successful in this field. So you've got to be really alert. You have to kind of have a radar where you can spot what is happening. And I've been working through a series of different areas in a way. French philosophy, which was the dynamic thing in the 1990s. The work of Gilles Deleuze, Jacques Derrida, and so on, that was what was fueling the debate. And increasingly, as I found myself teaching in some of these very famous design schools like Columbia and Harvard and the Architectural Association in London, I found myself kind of engaging with a very progressive world of architecture where the computer had come in and revolutionized everything. And in fact, I think the whole world of architecture had been injected with a new form of vitalism through the work of people like Zaha Hadid, Frank Gehry, and so on and so on. It was a very interesting phase that we were going through. Now I think we're going through something even more spectacular in the sense that we are not only opening up to new technologies, but also to new intellectual ideas. The interface between neuroscience and AI is opening up a series of a very fertile ground of theoretical reflection. And we're going through, I think, one of the most important moments in history. And back, I suppose, about 6-7 years ago, it was very clear to me that the writing was on the wall. This was going to be the thing that was going to change things. And I was particularly interested by the notion of intelligence itself. I'd been working on swarm intelligence beforehand, which is a kind of biological form of intelligence. And it seemed to me that this was going to be a game changer. But what was strange was that no one was aware of this. Back in 2019, which is not so long ago, I put a proposal to work with figures like Refik Anadol, now a rock star in the world of AI, with Zaha Hadid Architects, one of the leading practices in the world, sponsored by Google. The idea was to curate the British Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, and the UK had been a leader in the field, from Charles Babbage through to Alan Turing, through to many, many other figures. We weren't even shortlisted. That was 2019. And in the space really of a few years, things completely changed. I was fortunate to be positioning myself in the field then. I published what was the first book on AI and architecture that came out in December 2021. And now, of course, those books are out of date because the world is changing so much. But my particular interest is not just to be looking at architecture. And of course, there are some tools out there that are changing the world. I think in some senses, architects and designers have a slightly limited outlook. They they tend to think it means Midjourney or DALI or one of these diffusion models.
Right.
I like to look at the large language models that are fueling this change, and they're really transforming society. And I don't look towards architectural commentators. I look towards the leaders in the field itself, people like Geoffrey Hinton, where there is a huge debate that is going on. I think we're at a fascinating time. It's the most astonishing moment in my career. It is extremely exciting. It's extremely terrifying at the same time, I would
Mhm.
say.
Yeah.
And it's something of a soap opera, frankly, at the moment. If you look at what's going on in Silicon Valley
Yeah.
with Elon Musk suing OpenAI and so on, it is an all-consuming world that is changing our horizon, and I think it will change the way we operate in the future. So this is the place to be, as far as I'm concerned. It's a fascinating moment in history.
Yeah, I would agree. And I always look back to history, as I'm sure you do. The Renaissance certainly was disruptive to society for all the right reasons. And I think we are going through an AI renaissance. And I find that to be fascinating, certainly with all the societal impacts. And you mentioned the fact that, you're not focused just on architecture and design, but in society. And so just a quick question about how does society deal with this revolution that is happening? It's happened quickly. There's been layoffs. I've tried to evangelize and stem the tide and focus on education and evangelism versus product development to enable people to embrace it. But yet, I still think the layoffs are happening, and that it's a negative in the terms of the working population, but also there's all kinds of new jobs that have been created that really people don't focus on. So it isn't job loss, it's job replacement in many instances. So, what are your thoughts on that societal impact?
Yes, good question. I mean, when I was working on my first book, initially it was a more general book about AI. And at some point, after I'd done most of my research, I found myself a little compromised because I thought AI was going to be terrific and have a huge benefit for society, but there was also a dark side to it. And I managed to persuade my publishers to change my book into two separate books. One was going to be a white book, or a book with a white cover, which is published. That was the one that was published, Architecture in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, which was like, the angel, the good side of things. And one is going to have a black cover, the dark side, the Black Mirror episode, as it were, of AI. And I think it's important to beware of both. But my view is that AI is not inherently negative. It's just a tool. And like any tool, it's a question of who uses it and for what. I mean, I can use a kitchen knife to cut up my vegetables, or I can murder you. But don't blame the tool. It's the
Okay.
person using it. And so it's not evil, but I think it is incredibly capable. And it's precisely because it's so capable that it might actually have an impact on jobs. I think it will have an impact on jobs. People often say, my colleagues say, "Oh, well, no, it won't take jobs away. It'll just help us. It'll make things a lot easier, and it'll be a fantastic benefit." Well, yes, but research has come out, recent research from Harvard and MIT, that has shown that people can achieve much more quickly, and a much higher quality by using AI. Now, that's fantastic. But it also, if people can achieve much more, it means you probably don't need quite so many in that field. And I think everybody in the field, in the head of the field, they're all warning us. They're saying that down the road, we'll have to reconcile this. And I think that's undoubtedly the case. We will adapt. We will adapt in a way that's, that's what we do. That's what human beings do. We adapt, and it'll be a new world. If you think
Yeah.
some of the societal changes in the last few years, I mean, if 50 years ago you'd said, well, most marriages would end up in divorce, you'd think, oh my God, it's the end of society. But we have that now. That's the situation, and we've survived. We've found a new way of operating. And I think the same will be true with AI. I think that we'll have to adapt to a world in which there is perhaps not so much work, where we don't necessarily constitute our identity through our primary occupation, but we do other things. And I think we'll just move on and we'll adapt to that. The key issue, of course, is going to be a socio-political sort of question about or economic one rather, how do you finance a society where that is happening? Is it going to be possible to tax all the tech companies and find the revenue for, let's say, a universal basic income or whatever? I think, especially in the States, that might be quite difficult.
Yeah.
But for sure, those are the questions that we're going to face. So I think that the only constant in life is change, and it's going to change, and it's going to adapt. We've lost many things in the past that we never thought we'd lose, and we haven't even noticed. We haven't worried about it. I recall when I was a student, I would go on holiday somewhere. I would buy a reel of films, and I would get it processed afterwards. We don't have those anymore. We don't process films. Most camera shops have gone out of business because people have got they've got cameras on their iPhones. So the world is changing. We are adapting, and I'm not worried about the future, but it will be certainly a very different future. I just think that it's important to be aware of these things and to prepare for these things in advance. Otherwise, we will be, as it were, sleepwalking into oblivion. And I think that the profession of architecture, what it needs to design is not a series of new buildings. It needs to design its own future, because that is the real challenge right now. And I just simply say, just to finish off, that I think that education really is the crucial issue. Well, I've been surprised by the fact that actually the group most concerned about this, most geared up to deal with it, are actually construction companies. Surprisingly, Turner Construction and all these people, they are really focusing on this. I think eventually some of the organizations like the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, the RIBA, the Royal British Institute of Architects, and so on, are beginning to sort of gear up to it too. A number of practices have to gear up to it. The leading architectural designers in the world, Zaha Hadid Architects, Foster and Partners, and so on and so on, they are all using these tools because they have to in order to keep competitive in this market. The real challenge, though, is education, because we are teaching the students who are going to go out into this world where the singularity or whatever is going to happen, where life is going to be very, very different. And the problem I find with academia, I mean, surprisingly, because I thought academia normally comes up with new ideas, but surprisingly, there is a kind of I don't know. There are a lot of professors who are just ignorant of all this, and I worry that they're not up to date with things, and we're not preparing students for a very, very different world. It is going to be extraordinarily different. So that's the challenge. And frankly, when it comes to education, first of all, I don't think we're going to need so many students of architecture, which possibly means we don't need so many students, so many professors. And secondly, when AI can do much of the job, do we need, say, 5 years to study architecture, or do we only need 3? Now, if you put that together, it'll probably mean that we don't need so many professors in the future. So education is really at the heart of things, and I really think that we need to be teaching and engaging with students and alerting to the fact that we're dealing with a world that is rapidly changing, and it's getting faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, I will agree with its exponentiality and the reality of AI eliminating some of the menial tasks that are involved with every profession, every job, right? I'm hoping that we can graduate to a higher level of thinking because we're freed up from the menial tasks and tackle larger problems that are facing us in society, whether it's homelessness, affordable housing, which directly relates to architecture design. And are you hopeful that this pivot towards higher learning, even if it's with fewer professors and fewer architects, that we can tackle in an innovative way using AI to tackle these larger problems?
Maybe I could just touch on something you mentioned at the very beginning there, though, the exponential growth. I mean, I think that what we really need to recognize it is something truly extraordinary. I think in the past, the model that we've used for talking about this kind of growth has been Moore's law,
Mhm.
the idea that things will double every 2 years and so on, all that kind of thing. I don't think that model really applies to what we're dealing with these learning models. I mean, if you listen to someone like Jeffrey Hinton, what he's saying is basically the real challenge is the fact that these computers are learning so quickly because they share information instantaneously among each other. And we've been shocked, I think, by what's happened with these large language models, largely due to the introduction of obviously GPUs in the first place, but then transformers that have allowed them to do astonishing things. And they are speeding up. So the future is upon us way before everybody thought. I mean, all the predictions about when these things would happen, when AGI would happen. Well, maybe AGI is with us right now. And so I think that's what we need to wake up to more than anything else. It's almost viral. I think of it almost in the way that, say, COVID spread. We
Right.
were talking about, we had a thing called in the UK called the R number, which is if it's less than one, it's not spreading. More than one, it's spreading. Well, What happens when you've got it at 1,000? Then you've got a real explosion of knowledge. And ChatGPT knows 10,000 times more than any of us already. And the prediction is that if you by I think 2027 or something, it's going to know a billion times more. So it is going to be radically different in the future, and that is something that we need to grasp. It's not just straightforward Moore's law exponentiality. It is an explosion in some senses. So yes. In terms of what AI can do, well, I think AI can help us in almost anything. I see it as a kind of prosthesis. I'm particularly interested in the project Mustafa Suleyman, where he has a personal intelligence, as it were, a kind of which I think is going to transform how we operate to enhance us. What is happening, it's very clearly, is that we are being enhanced. We are kind of superhuman, as it were. We have an extension of ourselves in our phone, and so on and so on. We are now these kind of incredible cyborgs. And I think that we've been able to accomplish a lot more. The crucial question, however, comes down to, well, how is this going to be financed? What is the model? We're going to get some revenue back. And speaking in terms of the world of architecture, the way that everything is largely based in architecture is that we are paid by a percentage of the building costs. Now, they're never going to be any more buildings because they're expensive. They're going to be the buildings they're going to be, right? But if the fees start dropping down because you can do things much more quickly and people are being competitive and saying, well, instead of 5%, I can do it for 2%. All of a sudden, you've got a radical change, and there is less revenue coming into the profession. If it goes down to 2%, that means 40% of the revenue you previously had. Now, that's highly significant. And it might just be in terms of architecture that we see a shift that's been happening in China, where already, for different reasons, the fees have dropped down. And now nobody wants to do architecture. No student wants to study architecture. They want to go into other professions. And so the cultural capital of that profession might well go down. So, it will benefit us, absolutely. But the very benefits themselves could be, in a sense, the dark side. I see this in terms of the yin yang symbol you get in the Korean flag. There's a white side and there's a black side, and there's a seed of the black side in the white side. So it is that very capacity of AI that I think is going to kind of work its way through. So I think if we're going to really predict about the future, we need to be serious about not just about capitalism or the economy, but the architecture of the economy. How do we find those alternative sources of revenue? Sure, it will free us up to do other things, but are they going to necessarily bring any form of revenue? So I think that the future is very bright in some senses, but there's also a dark side to it. Although I have to say, somebody did ask ChatGPT about me apparently, and said, because I am both positive and also kind of worried about AI, and they said, is Neil Leach more positive or negative about AI? And apparently I'm 66% positive. So I'm more positive than I am negative. I just think we need to be very, very alert to all these things. We need to be predicting the future. And of course, that is precisely what AI does. And that's what human beings have always done to guarantee their survival. We need to think about the future and really prepare ourselves, design our futures, as they put it.
Yeah, I come from the creative side and advertising, branding, marketing. And, my concern is, why would an agency position themselves as an AI agency? There's, the death of social media agencies, you should have an AI agency. And the perception is, if I was the client, it's like, oh, you're doing that AI stuff? Great. So cut your costs by, 80% because that's the claim. You can do 10x the work. And I believe it's a misnomer to position yourself as a company or a consultant to say, I'm an AI powered graphic designer, let's say, because of this pitfall perception. And I think and again, this is all semantics, right? But, semantics leads to positioning, leads to perception, and leads to possibly, revenue opportunities, because that conversation with a client should be, yeah, I've integrated AI into my workflow, but so is everyone. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's in email. It's in PDFs. It's, so it's here, but I'm providing a larger value. I can do more for you. My work will be better for you, and I can solve and think about problems that you're giving me, designing problems, at a higher level than I could before. And that still has value. And I think that type of positioning is what's going to save these industries. AI has democratized a lot of the design processes and tools where I would call them the hacks, come into the market, and they're just excited because they're doing all this stuff that was relegated to, a profession. That certainly diminishes the value of our work. But those who have worked in the industry for 10, 20, 30 years, like myself, I try very hard to say, look what I could do for you versus look how cheap I can do it for you. And, unless we take that type of stance in the creative community, it will be a race to the bottom. And, Sam Altman said, I think just this week or last week, I will take care of 95% of tasks, marketing tasks within agencies. And, that's devastating as a statement, certainly from him. So am I right to kind of worry about that perception and communication?
No, you're absolutely right. I think the value is the key concern, and I think it needs to be really flagged up. I'm absolutely concerned. I agree with that. And I just, as an anecdote, I think back in the world of architecture, there was this drive to cut costs, and certainly the University of Cambridge, where I was studying, they discovered they could do a building much more cheaply by doing it design build, and instead of having a famous architect in there, they would just get done as cheap as possible. But then they realized that actually, if they got a really significant architect in there, that it would help with the fundraising. If they could say that we have got the Pritzker Prize winner, whatever, designed this building, that actually it did have some kind of knock-on effect that was very positive. But just going back to the question about AI itself, I think there are two ways of looking at AI in terms of what the employer expects. I mean, there was one view that's been expressed to me that basically clients are going to want all their architects to use AI because it's going to guarantee the return on their investment. It's going to make sure they don't make mistakes. And human beings make mistakes. So does AI now, but in the future, AI is going to be pretty perfect, and we're going to continue to make mistakes. So we're going to get better and better. So they're going to want to make sure that it's. I mean, I think AI in the future is going to be like a kind of spell check writ large. It's going to check things, make sure it's right. Product will be writing text. It's going to tell us whether we're saying something incorrect. It's going to correct us all the way through and make sure we don't make mistakes. I'm convinced of that. So on one side, it'll be expected. On the other side, you're absolutely right. Clients are now asking their architects, well, are you using AI, trying to leverage down the fees. And you're absolutely right. I think that could be one of the components that might drop the fees as well, alongside the fact that, frankly, I know small practices of 4 to 5 people who are competing with the big guys, the 200-person plus practices, because they can do it all through AI. So that is hugely significant. So it's going to be a kind of a combination of all those things. So, I'm not quite sure how the future will turn out, but it'll be, I think, a kind of a balance, in the sense that we will have to use AI. I think AI as a term will almost disappear because it will be just, it'll all be AI. It reminds me of the way that we used to speak about drawings when computer-aided design first came in the 90s. We would talk about CAD drawings, and they were distinguished from ordinary drawings that were done by hand. But as everything became a CAD drawing, so it shifted, and they were called drawings, and what we did by hand were called hand drawings. So, and I think that's the way it's going to be. It's going to be assumed. It's going to infiltrate everything. We're going to think through it in some senses. So I think you're right to flag both those issues, and I absolutely think the question of value is going to be one of the crucial questions that we need to face. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So, I mean, being involved in education yourself, and I've been lecturing at art schools and film schools because these students are wondering, am I going to have a job? Is there going to be an industry when I get out? And I was surprised, certainly in the design school, it was SCAD that I was at. The students have fully embraced it. They're just using it unabashedly. The professors are encouraging them, not necessarily requiring them, but they're saying, use this tool to build your narratives, to build your storytelling, to, help communicate complex concepts in a way that you maybe couldn't articulate before. Even in an oral presentation, if you're supported by visual presentations that are created in Midjourney, let's say, that there's a certain slickness and a validation to whatever story is presented in product development, let's say, that looks very professional. So, and actually extremely inspiring. I was actually blown away by some of these stories, visual storytelling that these specifically product design and UX design students were presenting, and I was able to comment on. So I think there's hope in the schools, as the students have certainly embraced it. Not all professors have at every university, but I think from a design world they are, and that's encouraging. And what has to happen for evolution / revolution to occur is that our youth embrace it from the beginning. So I have high hopes for the next generation. And even though, you and I have grown up with major technology changes and shifts in where the work is over the last 50 years, and now it's going to be exponential, but I'm hopeful that the youth are embracing it and will inspire the older generations as they show us what's going to happen. And I think we, as the older generation, needs to embrace and mentor them and guide them as they go, teach them about ethics, legalities, copyright infringement, all those things that are hot spots, hot topics in the world of AI, certainly regulation. Let's talk about regulation. So I think as a country, the US is looking towards Europe and the UK because they jumped on it a lot sooner than we did. I know you live in America now, but how do you look to Europe to help on the regulation side?
Well, let me just comment first on you're saying early on about the students, and that's always the case, right? Your 3-year-old niece knows more about how to use an iPad than you do, and I think and your grandmother, of course, knows nothing, doesn't know how to switch it on. So that's always the case. The next generation is more alert to these things, and I certainly found that my students. I was doing a more general course, a theory of digital technology, and I found that 95% of them were writing about AI. So the whole course became about AI, and they love it. That's their world. They are completely alert to it, and they are mutating and they are changing faster than anyone else. And the danger of the professors, they're stuck in the same place. The story of this professor who retires, who, when he started off, was packing out the auditorium. By the time he retires, there are about 6 people in the front row, and that's it. And he makes the comment, well, but I don't understand this. I'm teaching exactly the same material that I used to 30 years ago. Well, that's the problem. They're not developing and changing and adapting and things. And I think that the kids today can see those opportunities and so on. And it's for sure it's they're the ones that need to embrace it. In terms of regulation, I think that there was this attempt. You know about the Future of Life Institute too. They were concerned about these large language models that were developing these what they call emergent abilities or emergent capabilities. They were starting to write code and to translate languages, things they'd never been programmed for. And everyone was unsettled by it because it wasn't because of the sophistication of the programming, it was because of the size of the large language models. They had these emergent abilities, and that was causing a lot of concern. And so everyone wrote this letter, and but I mean, it's kind of crazy in some senses that you expect these people who are competing to slow down. I mean, this is the point that Jeffrey Hinton made. You can't, when Google are competing with Microsoft, you can't, ask them to slow down. It's like asking the leaders in the Olympic marathon to slow down. Of course, they won't slow down because their competitors will catch up. So it's very, very difficult to regulate anything in a free market economy. And it is even if we just look at history, there is no way that we were able to stop Putin from invading Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, there's no way that we can stop Putin from using slaughter bots or whatever these other things are in war. And I think we can frankly be grateful. I think, my theory is that he probably siphoned off most of the research funds for the AI and put them into his kind of the villas of oligarchs rather than focusing on. Otherwise, we would have a very, very different sort of world. So we can't control this thing. It's the genie's escaped or something, whatever the word is. And we just have to. But I don't think you need to worry, because I think the world always regulates in some way. It monitors itself in some senses. But there is that, and in terms of ethics, I think, and copyright and all those other issues. Part of the problem is that we haven't really caught up with these things. I mean, the question of copyright is much more complex than many people realize. We had a session on digital futures where we brought in some intellectual property lawyers from Harvard and MIT, and we were talking about these things. And I think the general public misunderstands the technology. They think that AI copies. It absolutely doesn't copy. We copy as human beings, but
Yeah.
AI doesn't. And the complexity of the situation are very, very nuanced. And I think even the legal world is very slow to pick up on what's going on. The idea that, and recently the Copyright Office, the US Copyright Office, ruled that you couldn't copyright something that had been produced by AI. Well, anyone who works with AI knows that there's a huge input by the person who's actually writing the prompt, selecting the whatever it is. There's a huge human input, and so even that world has not up to pace with what's going on. There are many, many different questions going on, and it's not so easy to find a framework to really regulate this, even if people would pay attention to it in the first place.
Yeah, I think it'll be a landmark decision if they decide that you can copyright what are essentially digital artworks. I mean, digital artwork has happened for, 30 years, even before the birth of the internet. So, I came from a very traditional art background. I was an illustrator. I was trained as an illustrator. I illustrated for many years, and I embraced the computer and wanted to do everything digital, and became a designer and a brander and a marketer because of that pivot that I personally made. So, yes, it's software. It has human input. It starts with a spark of a creative mind that inspires an exploration using these tools to manifest some thought, some inspiration in a creative's mind on what they want for a specific outcome. That is the creative process, no matter what tool you use. And so I'm hoping that that spark of human ingenuity will be recognized in the discussion around copyright, and that the naysayers can embrace the fact that all this is still valuable. And whether you're using computers, whether you're using AI or not, that human-centered approach to design, creativity, architectural design, paintings, we're still driving it. There's no motivation that the computer has to just create art for art's sake, and they're just going to all of a sudden be doing that. It starts with, yes, a prompt, but it starts with that spark within a creative mind.
No, I mean, just to add to that, I mean, I was at a conference recently in Kitzbühel in Austria where there was a very indignant designer who was saying, well, what's going to happen to creativity when the computer takes over? What's human creativity will disappear? Well, frankly, if someone has been usurped by Midjourney, that means they're not very creative in the first place. Secondly, anyone who's truly creative will be able to seize this tool and work creatively with it, or inventively. I'm not quite sure about the term creativity because it's a very new concept, but certainly inventiveness is a thing that I would certainly celebrate. And I think that's what's going to happen. It's going to be the way in which we imagine possible futures by using this tool as a prosthesis that becomes a kind of extension of our mind and opens up amazing futures. And there will be people who will seize that. But I think we have to recognize there's the shift in way that we're designing and operating. It's less totally the top-down imposer of form. It's more the someone who is able to control these processes and use them for the advantage of the world of art and so on, design. That seems to be the shift. And we are searching, looking for, creating a search space, looking for possible outcomes, and then selecting those outcomes. It's a very different world. I see it a bit like the way that which photography has changed from the old-fashioned way. You take that one photograph, you'd set it up for half an hour and maybe take a little Kodak photograph and then take that shot. Now we take a burst of shots. So we select out the best one, we edit it and whatever, enhance it and so on. And that, I think, is the way in which design itself is evolving, and it's mutating and changing like everything else in life.
Yeah, it's just speeded everything up. and I think to an advantage, and actually leads to more creative solutions because I've always been open to, and I quote Bob Ross, the happy little accidents that happen along the way that you had no preconception of during a creative process, whether that's in creative research, experimentation, what have you. And, nothing as a result of a design process is necessarily what you had a preconception of. And the process, again, it's accelerated now by AI, and leads to different outcomes that you had never imagined before. And that's what I find exciting.
Yeah, maybe I could just add to that. I don't know if you know, I'm sure you know how a GAN works, generative adversarial network. There are two networks. One is a generator that's kind of spewing out these options, and then there's a discriminator that's selecting them and saying, I'm not convinced by that, not convinced by that, and so on. And it's a combination of those two. Now, even though the models that we use primarily these days are diffusion models, they don't operate that way at all. That general model, I think, explains how we as human beings operate. Now, I think that human beings are very good discriminators. We've got a very good eye or nose or something. We can taste, smell a perfume and immediately know if we like it or not, sip a cocktail, immediately know if we like it or not, and look at a photograph or an image and immediately be able to judge it very, very quickly. I don't think we're as good as imaginative as we think we are in terms of generating solutions. And I think what we're discovering by using AI, that there's a huge range of other options that we hadn't thought about. We're continually surprised by what we can do. And I think that's the side that really is enhancing our production. And it's our weak side, to be honest. We always say, oh, we're so creative. Well, I think, oh, really? Are we really? We tend to follow patterns and do what other people have done before, not quite the same. If you're an architect, it's got to be a building a little like Zaha Hadid, or a little like Norman Foster, or a little like Frank Gehry, but not the same. And then if you do get a revolutionary sort of architect like Frank Gehry doing the Bilbao Museum in Guggenheim, he tends to copy himself. So there's a canon to architecture, there's a canon to the world of art and so on, and that's how it operates. So we can use these tools to really open that up and to explore new horizons in inventive new ways.
Yeah, and I'm glad in your earlier comments you talked about true creativity because I've written about that, true creatives and this discerning capability of artists, designers. I call that having the aesthete. And whether you went to art school or not, or you're born with it, it's a gift of God or whatever, you have this preordained gift of being able to say, that works, that's great, I like that, it's working. And that's a human reaction. And I think that guiding this evolutionary process using AI ultimately leads to better creative and and again, human centered.
Yeah, I think that the what I would say is, since we both work in the visual arts, the notion of the eye, having a good eye, is something that has, I think, been underrated. Not everybody has this. People be super intelligent, but not have that sort of exquisite taste. I think the way we're going in the future, it's going to privilege that. You're going to be able to really be a kind of curator, as it were. It's going to shift the emphasis, So people like myself, who, I write all about theory, but I'm not necessarily a technologist. But you don't need to be anymore now that the technology does it for you. You need to have that overview and that taste and to be able to curate things. And I think that is it. You can't actually produce anything on Midjourney or DALL-E or whatever without having a good eye. You just can't steer it in the right direction because you don't have that discerning view. Now, I think that's going to always be there. And there's always going to be those people with exquisite taste who are going to survive and prosper in this new domain where it's opening up these new horizons.
Yeah, and again, I think it justifies the need for art schools still because yeah, you could be born with a gift, but to harness it, that's done can be done in an educational environment that supports and nurtures that. So I think there's hope for the next generation. I think there's hope for art schools and architectural schools, and things will change for sure. I had to say, this has been a fascinating conversation. I think you're a fascinating individual, and thanks for your leadership and your guidance and evangelism and helping people understand the opportunities of AI. And just the last, minute throw to you. Please promote anything you want to promote, upcoming speaking engagements or whatever, or a new book. You've written over 40 books. Is there a new book coming out?
Yes, I have to finish it today. So yes, no, I would just simply say that, Digital Futures is a platform that we put together, and the idea is to kind of to be a para-educational thing, to be there to help people. For us, education shouldn't be a privilege of the wealthy. It should be a universal human right. And we deliberately broadcast everything we do and make it completely free. And it's out there. And there are many tutorials on how you use AI, many discussions about the copyright, and last Saturday we had something on Sora, the OpenAI's new text to video generator, and so on. There are many things out there that are helpful and free. And secondly, I would just say that Instagram is the place to go if you want to see what's happening in terms of the stuff that's been produced. Everybody, that's become the gallery, as it were, where people put that, and churn things out every day. My Instagram account is Neil Leach, NeilLeach 14, just one word, and that's where I put things out. And I think it's there's a community now where we're bouncing ideas off each other, and it's a very interesting sort of debate that's going on. So I would suggest, not just me, but there are others as well, to get involved in that and to see what's happening, because it's a very exciting and dynamic world.
Absolutely. And just want to say thank you so much. And for our viewers and listeners, thanks to all of you for tuning in, and catch more of our RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms. Please follow and smash that subscribe button. So thanks again, Neil. We would love to have you back. Things are changing so rapidly, and best to you.
Thank you, Curt. It's been a great conversation. Let's to be continued.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of you for tuning in, and catch more of our RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms. Please follow and smash that subscribe button. Hey there, welcome to the Realm. Are you a startup? Are you an AI startup? Do you think you are the next unicorn in AI? Maybe, but you better be prepared if you want to talk to investors. RealmIQ's AI Accelerator has a new program called Smart Track. It is an 8-week advisory where we mentor founders for success in their presentation, product, and then open them up to our network of investors. If you're interested in becoming the next AI unicorn, go to realmiq.com/startups to learn more and apply.
RealmIQ. Book your corporate AI workshop today.
CurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing and product development.